Let's keep reading Cavern of the Fear. We're up to chapter 3, Shadows. Leaf sat at the great table in the palace kitchens, fighting down rage as he listened to Banda's story. Doom sat opposite him, his face as usual showing no emotion. Beside Doom was Jasmine, her head bowed. Banda had learned of the Norad's people's fate from Tom, the strange shopkeeper he, Leaf and Jasmine had met on their journey through the north. "When I found the city deserted, I went to Tom," he said. "I knew he could tell us what had happened, if anyone could. He says the Rakachars were seen marching the people toward the border. It was only days before the Shadow Lord's defeat." Jasmine lifted her head. "These people were helpless," she said bitterly. "Among them was the girl Tira who saved our lives. And still we do nothing. We sit here and talk, while thousands of souls all over Deltora are willing and able to." "Jasmine," Leaf's stomach was churning. We cannot march on the Shadowlands. The Shadow Lord's sorcery is too mighty to be defeated on his own ground." "But the belt," Jasmine began. "The belt was made for defense, not attack," Doom broke in. "The gems cannot be taken beyond Deltora's borders. Can you have forgotten that, Jasmine?" Jasmine had forgotten it, but she paused for only a moment. "Then we must invade the Shadowlands without the belt," she said stubbornly. "Deltorans are suffering. There is slavery, perhaps in torment." "I know this, Jasmine. Not an hour passes that I do not think of it," cried Leaf, jumping to his feet. "But I cannot send thousands of other Deltorans to their deaths in a hopeless quest to save them. I can do nothing until I find a weapon we can use against the Shadow Lord. I cannot and I will not. Do you understand?" Jasmine's mouth was a thin, hard line. "I understand only too well, Leaf," she said coldly. "We are to give the prisoners up for lost, while you go into hiding in Tora Well. I will have no part of it." She turned and almost ran from the room. With a muttered curse, Banda went after her. Leaf slumped back into his chair again. "She does not understand, Doom. I must tell her." "You must not." Doom leaned forward urgently, gripping Leaf's arm. "You must follow the plan in absolute secrecy. It is so important, Leaf. It is the most important thing. You know it." Leaf gritted his teeth, then slowly nodded his head. Meanwhile, Jasmine could no longer hear Banda calling her name. He had gone outside, thinking she would surely make up for the open air. She was glad of that. She did not want to be found and soothed. She wanted to stay angry. At least anger was a feeling she understood. She made her way to the great dining room. She was sure that at this hour it would be deserted. She was annoyed, therefore, to find that the dining room was not empty at all. Hunched on one side of the huge table was the hulking, savage figure of her old enemy, Glock. Facing him on the other side was the one person she liked even less, Jinx, the malicious little man who had once been a palace acrobat. Both men were wearing a heavy glove on one hand. Each had a small wooden cage, a mug of ale, and a pile of coins at his elbow. Between them, wrestling on the polished wood, were two huge spiders. One was spotted brown, the other was darker, with a splash of yellow on its back. At the sound of the opening door, Glock and Jinx turned sharply but relaxed when they saw who it was. "Why, it is the king's wild little friend, hero of the quest for the belt of Deltora," Jinx jeered. "To what do we owe the honour of this visit, my lady?" As he spoke, the spider with the yellow back flipped its opponent over and leaped on top of it, fangs bared. "Wind to flash!" bawled Glock in excitement. "Wind to flash!" Jinx agreed resentfully. He pushed his pile of coins to Glock's side of the table. Glock snatched up the winning spider in his glove hand and thrust it into its cage. The spider, which had just escaped death, jumped up and threw itself against the cage bars. "Be still, Fury," said Jinx, pulling it away none too gently. "You will have your revenge soon enough." Have you nothing better to do than gamble on fighting spiders? Jasmine demanded in disgust. You seem to have nothing better to do than watch us, weakling, growled Glock. Just take yourself off. Jinx cleared his throat. I hear the king is going to Torah, he said, his face alight with mischief. Are you accompanying him, my lady? No, I am not, snapped Jasmine. Smiling, Jinx pulled a roll of parchment from his coat and pretended to study it. That does not surprise me under the circumstances, he muttered. Jasmine burned to know what he meant, but was determined not to ask. Leaf should not be going to Torah, mumbled Glock, filling his mug with ale again. He should be raising an army to invade the Shadowlands, making plans to rescue my people. Ah, well, you are the last of the jealous, my lumbering friend, and the jealous have always been fools for fighting, said Jinx, looking down his nose. But do you really want to join the rest of your tribe in slavery across the mountains? I would not be captured, growled Glock. I am Glock, the greatest jealous fighter. I am protected by a powerful talisman, passed down to me by my family through the ages. Oh, indeed, jeered Jinx. Glock fumbled under his stained shirt and drew out a small faded cloth bag which hung on a string around his neck. See here, he shouted, pulling the bag open and tipping a carved lump of wood, 3 stones, a few tiny twigs, and a scrap of shriveled purple into his enormous hand. The talisman of a goblin killed by one of my ancestors, a stone from the belly of a diamond serpent, and 2 more from the dragon's nest, herbs of great power, and the flower of a gripper. Oh, I see. Jinx's small eyes were glittering with amusement. So you would be safe in the Shadowlands, would you? You could lead our army to victory? Of course, said Glock, in a calmer tone, carefully tipping the heap of objects back into the bag. And so I have told Leaf again and again, but he will not listen. Ah, he has more important things in mind just now, said Jinx in an all-knowing air. You know nothing of what is in Leaf's mind, Jinx, flashed Jasmine, very irritated. Jinx darted a spiteful look in her direction. There you are wrong, my lady. I know what I hear. You talk like a fool, and stop calling my lady, Jasmine exclaimed. Jinx pursed his lips and went back to studying his parchment. The silence lengthened, and at last Jasmine's curiosity got the better of her pride. Well, what have you heard? She demanded. Jinx smiled slyly. Why, everyone knows that Leaf is going to the Torah to find a bride, he said. Jasmine felt her face grow hot. That is ridiculous, she cried. Leaf is far too young to marry. Jinx looked her up and down, from her tangled black hair to her bare brown feet. Such ignorance is to be expected, no doubt, in one who grew up in the forest instead of at a palace, as I did, he said, his lip curling. But I had thought you would have known, since you are such a great friend of the king's. Why, rumour has it that your own father has been helping him choose the best of the royal jewels for his bride. Glock muttered something under his breath and drank deeply, though he had plainly had too much ale already. The king and queens of Deltora always marry young, Jinx went on in a lecturing tone. It is their duty. Leaf must produce an heir as soon as possible, a child to take his place should he die. Jasmine did not answer. Of course, what Jinx said made sense. One life was a fragile thing to stand between Deltora and the Shadowland, but Leaf to marry? Why had he not told her? Aware of Jinx's sharp eyes upon her, she struggled to keep her face from showing any feeling. Jinx pushed the parchment towards her. See here, if you do not believe me, he said. This is one of the old papers our king has been studying. I made arrangements to borrow it from the library this morning. I like to keep up with affairs of state. With gossip, you mean, growled Glock, burying his nose in his ale once more. Jasmine glanced at the parchment. It was covered in names, lines, and symbols. At the top was a title in flowing script. The Great Families of Torah. You see, crowed Jinx, Leaf will choose his queen from one of the best Tauran families. Glock snorted. Why go all the way to Torah for a wife, he slurred. There are plenty of pretty girls in Dell. Jinx looked at him with disdain. Leaf is following ancient ways, he said loftily. Adin himself married a Tauran, and his children did the same. Adin was a wily bird, he knew the value of keeping strong links between East and West. The Taurans say that Adon married for love, retorted Jasmine. Jinx sniggered knowingly. No doubt the Tauran lady in question was high-born, well-read, and very beautiful, he said. I dare say Adon was pleased enough with his choice, as Leaf will be in turn. Glock guffawed into his mug, spattering the table with specks of foam. Jasmine could not bear their company any more. She left the room and made for the kitchen. But before she could reach it, she was stopped by the sound of Sham's voice. Jasmine, Banda was looking for you, Sham called, hastening towards her. Now he has gone to his rest, for he rode all night, and Leaf and Doom said to say goodbye. They have just left for Torah. Seeing Jasmine's frown and misunderstanding it, Sham smiled kindly. They will be quite safe, Jasmine. Tauran magic will speed their journey. They may have arrived. Even now, they will be back in a day or two. Bringing someone with them, I believe, Jasmine answered in a hard voice. A young lady of high birth. Sham's eyes widened. Who told you that? She asked sharply. Jasmine shrugged. I cannot remember now, she said. She lied. It is true, though, I imagine. Sham hesitated. I can tell you nothing, she said at last. I'm sorry. That was answer enough for Jasmine. She gave a small nod and turned to go. Sham bit her lip. Do not be angry with Leaf, Jasmine, she pleaded. He is only doing what he must. What is his duty? Oh, I understand, said Jasmine coolly. I understand completely.